All right. So, Brian, can you say a little bit about yourself and where you're at right now?
Yeah, how you doing? I am Brian Masters, CW4. Brian Masters. I'm the senior maintenance tech for 18th Field Artillery Brigade at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
All right, and I had the pleasure of having Brian in an industrial base broadening course about a year ago, a little over, and he's agreed to talk to us about some of the things he learned, was able to apply. In fact, he's gotten a lot of attention for his ability to apply some of the things he learned at IB2 Log and the things that grew out of that, some additional education that he's done, and partnerships with even some of the our industry partners that he met at the course overall. So Brian, here's the first question. It's been a little over a year since you participated in the IB2 Log course. Is there something you would say that stood out over all the other moments from the program that still holds significance for you today?
So I think one thing that stood out from the program, and we went through this a year ago, I think it was March or April when we went through. And when you go to all companies or industry or wherever we go, they always talk about change, right? The Cotter 8-step model of change, and how, change is constant. So we always have to change and adapt to change and move forward. So, I mean, in today's environment, that's become paramount, is our ability to adapt to change and to continue to evolve. So one of the things we really took away from that is that change is constant. And then during change, you have to look at three things, and it aligns with .mil PF, but it's people, process, and technology. So there's three different areas when you're looking at changing or solving a problem. Is you look at the people. That's probably the quick thing to look at. Do we have the right people? Do we have the right training? Are they doing the right thing? So you look at the people first, then you look at the processes. So you got to be hard on the process. So if we have the right people, do we have the right processes laid out for them, and maturity in our processes? Are we changing our processes and evolving our processes? So you look at people, you look at process, and then lastly, and probably the most expensive one, but the easiest one, is technology. So is our technology keeping up to date with our people and our processes? Do we have to evolve our technology, which is a significant undertaking for both the military and the private industry?
Yeah, I remember that conversation about be hard on the process, not on the people. That it's a lot of people just say, I don't care about what the process is, people, you figure it out. And it's the other way around in industry.
Yeah. So that's absolutely true, and I think as a good leader, we have to do that, right? We're going to get our people, especially in the Army. You don't really control who you get. I know we're refining our talent management systems right now. So there's a little bit of say on who we get, but you get who you get. And then it's on you as a leader to have refined processes, provide some vision, and to hold those accountable, and also look for opportunities for growth, whether it be in the technology field.
Nice. All right. So in the past several months, you've developed a customizable interactive maintenance readiness dashboard meant to increase efficiency maintenance of the 18th Field Artillery Brigade based at Fort Bragg. Could you tell us more about the idea and how your experience from IB2 Log contributed to the development?
Yeah, so IB2 Log really kick-started this dashboard idea. So the Army, we have dashboards. Everyone wants to talk about dashboards. And then we have RCOP, or we have the commander's dashboard, or other dashboards that are available that commanders can use, but they're not customizable. And you can't update them in real time and see the things you want to see. So the way I see a graph might be different than the way, Van sees a graph. So, and we interpret data differently. So being able to understand how people interpret data in order to influence decision making. So whenever you have data, you have a problem set, and you want to influence a certain decision by a key stakeholder, then it's how do you relate that stakeholder to the problem. So data visualization is pretty powerful in that, and it also can provide a motivating feature for teams. So we went to GE, and at the GE plant where they build the engines, it shows they're broken down into teams, and they have even cool little team names. But there's a display on the wall that shows production of the engine as it flows through and where it's at in the cycle. And then I believe it also captures defects, or it captures rework, but it visually displays where that team is at in the cycle. So now they can see it, but everybody else can see it. So, competition is great. In the Army, we love to compete, and it just gives another thing, lets you, push a little bit harder. So GE, that really spurred the idea. And I remember getting back and talking to the battalion techs, like, hey, we need to have a dashboard up there so everybody knows where they're at, and it's as close to real time as we can get. So GE kind of spun that dashboard idea. So we started building it, started developing it. And then there's another student in there, I think I'm talking about Ben Ruffner, Major Ruffner. He started using, I think, playing around with Power BI a little bit. And then there's somebody, 21st TSC, who sent me the example of their Power BI dashboard. So just started playing with it. It's a Microsoft product. It's just like Excel, PowerPoint, Access. There's enough YouTube videos out there and information to figure it out. So just started building the dashboard. And then, once you start showing the data in a way that people can digest easily and process, and most importantly, make a decision at the point, like the quickest we can make the decision point to the data, the better we're going to be, and the more impact that decision is going to have. So it's looking at data through that aspect. So GE was huge in that. And then, although I didn't go to Volvo during IB2 log, Van connected me with Volvo, and I was able to take the maintenance leadership from the brigade along with some leadership from the ESC and other organizations on Fort Bragg. And through conversation with Volvo, we learned that they use Power BI as well, and they use SAP for the ERP system. So they use Power BI for quick data visualization, quick analytics, and it just really benefits to have that ability. So really, GE and Volvo were two of the huge influencers for the customizable dashboard, as well as Murano, who is the AI supply chain management company for Honda.
I remember going to the GE plant with your groups, and they had a lot of red on their graphs. And I remember the response from everybody from a military standpoint, man, having that much red, that's just failure, and the conversation about it. So in your dashboard, as I recall, you brought up something, you figured out what was really driving probably one of your biggest issues for readiness, and put it up there. And it was a bad metric when you put it up there. Did you get resistance for putting a bad metric up?
Yeah, and of course, and it goes back to, so we look at equipment readiness. Everyone in the Army wants to talk about your FMC percentage or your operational readiness. And if you're clean, you're good to go. Well, that just shows a little bit of the picture, right? We want to dig in. We want to constantly change. We want to constantly improve. So I don't know if I learned it from you or from Lean Six Sigma, but, asking 5 whys, to really get to the root cause of a problem. And you just keep digging in, and there's KPIs, but then there's your indicators that feed those KPIs, or your different metrics that influence that. So, and then some have more weight than others. So what we learned when you're looking at operational readiness rate, you can look at manpower, people. You can learn at, repair cycle time. So that's processes, or you can look at supply. And we really started looking at manpower, supply, and processes differently. And then we started measuring that, like, what's our repair cycle time? If we have a 97% OR rate, but this one fleet is sitting around 87, well, let's look at that repair cycle time. Well, why is that repair cycle time so long? And then it could be because the personnel aren't trained on it, or it could be that we're not getting the parts there in a timely manner, or having good accountability of our parts. So once we started adjusting that, we quit focusing on the red in the upper, in my slide, it's in my dashboard, it's in the upper left-hand corner. And we started focusing on all the indicators that feed that. And we really saw a lot of growth, and we were able to make to impact change quickly.
Nice. All right. So with the current pandemic, we've seen unprecedented working environments. How have the best practices learned from IB2 log helped you personally in making any complex decisions recently?
Yeah, so I think Jim Brunke, I think when he talked, and Jim was great. He shared a lot of great experience from his different echelons in the private industry. But he said communication is the bridge. So in this environment, we have to communicate, and a lot of it is either digital communication, over text, over Teams, or Zoom, or whatever it is. It's digital communication. So communication is the bridge, and the more you can communicate, that'll allow you to lead through change. And it's always asking the right questions. So when you do communicate, are you asking good questions? Are you listening to the responses? And are you staying humble through the change, and staying humble through the uncertainty?
That's good guidance. Okay, so one can argue that up-to-date data analytics strategy are extremely important for readiness and preparedness in the context of any situation. In what ways have you found that data analytics have been impactful in the context of COVID over the past few months?
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? So COVID hit, and we go down to minimal manning, but equipment is still broke, right? So launchers are still broke, trucks are still broke, the supply pipeline is still moving, we're still receiving parts, but we have to protect our soldiers because we still have a real-time mission. So you got to balance all of that, and data can help. So the way data can help is if you look at data as a sand table. So you can take your equipment situation report, you can take your pipeline data, you can take everything that's coming, all your feeders, and then you can lay it all out there through data. And then you can link them together, and then you can forecast and you can plan based off that and show different models. I think Brandon McCollin from NC State came down and showed us that with how we can use some forecasting methods to see if we change one thing, how is that going to affect downstream? If we change our personnel outload or our personnel availability, how can we do that? And I think another good case is whenever COVID hit, before COVID, we started not experimenting, but we started implementing additive manufacturing. So we started using some 3D printing to bring equipment up faster as we wait for long lead time parts. Well, COVID hit, and there was a shortage of PPE. So through 18th Airborne Corps, they understood that we had 3D printing capability, and there was a need for these plastic face shields. So it's just a acrylic face shield with a 3D printed halo that goes over the top. And COVID hit, but I think we ended up printing 1,300 face shields, and about 800 of those being distributed across Fort Bragg through different levels and different soldiers. But what data analytics provided me to do, everybody wants to know, is when, how much, and when can you do it? So through data analytics, we were able to build a production planner that laid out an achievable planning schedule that was aggressive, but it met goals, and we produced them ahead of time and at a considerably lower cost than what it would be if we were to try to buy them, even today, I think. So data analytics, like I said, is essentially a sand table.
So you're using that data analytics, your forecast and your plan turned out to be about right based off of what?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah. So and you have to be able to change. You have to be able to adjust variables and take in consideration there's certain assumptions, when you start up production. But a lot of this was derived from experiences at GE, experiences at Lockheed Martin, some Lean Six Sigma training, and just soldiers wanting to get it done. And then data analytics was able to kind of lay it out in a time frame that met the goal or exceeded the goal.
Nice. All right. When finding yourself in the role of a leader with a team of experienced individuals, what do you find the most important in the relationship between teamwork and refining the logistics operational frameworks you interact with every day?
Yeah, so the first part of the question is great. And I'm just going to stick with the first part because I think the second part can change no matter what environment you're in. right? A leader is a leader in that they provide vision, and most importantly, they trust the team. So if you are a leader, and in your question, you say the leader with a team of experienced individuals. So the leader doesn't have to be the most experienced person in the team, right?
Right.
They have to understand how that team embeds into the next higher level. So where do they fit into the bigger picture? And then they can provide vision on where the team can integrate into that, right? But if you have a team full of experienced professionals, your best thing as a leader is to knock down impediments and let that team execute at a high caliber, and foster that winning atmosphere, foster the team environment, help each other out. But as a leader, whether it's through logistics, whether it's through, just base maintenance, whether it's at, Walmart, Target, or, wherever you are, it's the leader provides vision, knocks down the impediments that might face the team, especially if you have a high performing team.
Very true. And were you able to bring some things back from IB2 log in helping in that leadership theory that you shared just then?
Yeah. So I've got, not me, I mean, we 18th FA has got some extremely talented warrant officers.
Yeah.
And the warrant officers right now, they have to be the technical experts. They have to be the innovative force in the Army that basically does what IB2 log, teaches. And that's reach out, find better way to do things, and figure out how to integrate that. So by definition, the warrant officer in the Army is the integrator of systems. So depending on what rank you are, you're an integrator of systems at different levels. So as warrant officers, we need to benchmark. We need to look at other organizations, find out what the latest and greatest things are, and then see how we can integrate that into our formation. Just because we do things a little differently in the Army doesn't mean the way Volvo attacked maintenance delay time can apply to how we attack maintenance delay time in 18th FA. We can take some best practices, we can take lessons learned, and we can integrate some of the systems that they've used into ours, and then continue to refine and go back.
Yeah, that was one. So in the Army, we always depended on the warrant officers to be the experts of all the systems, and the systems seemed to all be in paper and processes. And there was a network of warrant officers, a famed network of warrant officers that could work the system and get the results you needed. You could always depend on them. And it seemed like in that first IB2 log, there was a frustration expressed in that the whole game changed. All the processes, all the technology, and with that, these expectations for what the warrant officers would need to be experts at were very different. And so, yeah, I think what you just described is sort of, job description of a warrant officer previously was just the expertise. Job description now is an expert on the systems and all the tools that you now have, which are very much commercial based.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think we got one more question. If you give a departing message to any incoming IB2 log participants about the biggest takeaway from the program and that meant the most to you, what would that be?
So I think first and foremost, as a warrant officer, as a leader, is the greatest and most meaningful innovation is grown at the point of need. So it's understanding where the need is at. So when we went to all these benchmarking trips with IB2 log and saw all the things, we didn't talk to the executives, the senior level management. We talked to the technicians on the floor or the planners or wherever it was. It was at the point of need. So you have to understand truly what the problem is if you want to bring some meaningful innovation that can be sustained. Because anybody can win once. It's can you continuously win over time? And that's where true meaningful innovation comes from, is understanding what the problem is and attacking it at the point of need. And then leaders must understand the challenges that face the organization, the teams, and the individuals. So you can understand the problems with the systems, but you got to understand the dynamics of the organization, how it flows, how the teams are underneath it, and the individuals that make up that team.
It's very good. And now on that, one of the objectives of IB2 log is so that the folks that the military selects to go to the class can understand where there are opportunities to benchmark and what benchmarking would look like. That you wouldn't just go to the the Russian long range precision fires unit and benchmark them because they're the only place you can learn from. That you can learn from any sort of business that and you actually took that lesson away. A number of alumni have, but you're one of probably the better examples and have really become a person that mentors others through benchmarking. You are interested in seeing other businesses yourself. And you mentioned that you weren't just listening to the executives, because the executives will give you this wonderful, polished, everything's roses view of their business, as they should. They're selling their business. We had some of those in the early benchmarking, but as the students went through and they started to understand, after seeing many businesses, they would immediately get to sort of the crux of the issue, how they made these decisions. And do you find yourself being able to get other people to see benchmarking in that way when you take them to places like Volvo or SAS or the other places you've been?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you got to break that. You got to change the way you think, right? If you want change in an organization, first thing you got to do is change the way you think. Then you got to change the way you act. So prior to these benchmarking visits, we would talk to, if I was bringing some maintenance NCOs who grew up 15, 18 years in motor pools in the Army and say, well, that's not the way we do things in the Army. Well, that's fine. This is the way this company does it. This is how they have adapted. And let's just look at the environment and see if we can bring anything back. See if we can take anything from there and bring it back. So it's laying that groundwork. You don't just show up at Volvo and say, I'm the Army and how can you make me better? It's a partnership, right? It's like, how can we learn from you? Maybe you can pick up some things from us, and then we can share and dialogue and talk about a bunch of different things and learn. So, when we went to GE, they build the engines for the aircrafts, ginormous. And, I'm bringing 30 mechanics with me and lieutenants and warrant officers. And these are some cool engines. But we go there, and they're more fascinated with the way the workbenches are set up, with the way the flow of the equipment moves. There's this like huge engine right behind them, and they could care less. They're looking at the cutouts for the toolboxes, and they're looking at, the different job or different aids that are there to make, ergonomics better so that they can perform higher. And, their little team rooms, now they have team planning. So they're interested in that, right? And that was really cool, and they got it. And some people will, some people won't, but that's okay.
So your guys have created a team room version like what they saw at GE in your maintenance operations now?
Yeah, so each maintenance has like a maintenance support team with a team chief, and they share responsibilities. Some organizations do it better than others. One of the things that GE had was a council, so where each team would provide a couple people. So we started that in the brigade. We had a maintenance council where we didn't, for the NCOs, we wanted all E4s and below. And, it'd be commodities or supply or, it's solving problems where the problems are. The further you are away from the problem, the easier it is to solve because you don't know it. So you have to understand the problem. And I really got that from GE. And Volvo was really good in understanding condition-based maintenance and how to refine processes and use technology and analytics to really drive at readiness. So there are two different desired outcomes that both achieved it. And then, of course, there was the LPD led band where we did the beer game in the brewery. And that really kind of hit home as taskers come down and we're adjusting the requirements. Like, you don't remember the beer game? It was only went up 4 cases. That's it. So you have to delete that for anybody that comes through next.
Yeah. All right. You had showed right before we started this some slides to Sabrina based off the system that you've developed overall and some of the examples of the dashboard. As I understand it, the dashboard that you initially developed really attacked like one of the primary problems. I think it was carcasses on some electronics control system or something. I'm probably getting that wrong, but then once you solved that, it was like a long time for you guys to turn them in, and you turned it in just a few days, which then allowed those rebuilt parts to feed your system and solved an issue. You moved on to something else. Is that reflected in your dashboard?
Yeah. So, and dashboards, they have to be customizable, they have to be adaptable, and they have to address a problem. Like, we're not going to look at something just to look at it. It has to be a need. And I keep saying need. There has to be a requirement to do something. So, in Cotter's 8-step model, the first thing you do is, build a sense of urgency. So why are we doing this? So yeah, the first thing we looked at was what's called orals, or it's your repairables that need to get sent back to the depots to get rebuilt. And we were looking at the lead time it took for us to turn in our orals, and then the money that would be incurred due to that. And a lot of that's just processes, right? It's just like, hey, I took this engine out. I need to get this engine back to the SSA so we can get back to Red River so we can get rebuilt, right? And it's just being good stewards. But it's easy to take the engine out, put it in the back of the motor pool, and just get to it when you get to it, not understanding the downstream effect, right? And putting that visualization up there, and especially, you got to attack red. Like, when a commander sees red on a slide, you have to attack it. Nobody wants to be red. So using a KPI that was conditionally formatted, and the KPI that we went to is just a gauge, just a regular gauge. And whenever it hit, 10 days is the standard in the Army. So whenever it hit 7, it went amber. So amber is almost as bad as red. And then at 10, it goes red. So it provides that immediate feedback. And then we've been able to sustain that and without an issue. So we went from, I think the average was like 60 days to get a repairable turned back in, to now we're at like 3 or 4 days, but that was also an indicator of repair cycle time. So remember I talked about your people, your repair cycle time, and then supply. Yeah. So are we getting our parts from the SSA or from the supply system, and are we issuing them to work orders in a timely manner, and then getting that repair part removed from the equipment and then back into the supply system for rebuild? So it was just one of those, we could look at our OR rate, but there's things that lead into that, just like repair cycle time. There's things that lead into repair cycle time. So really that's, the 5 whys, like what's the root cause? And then we went into, overdue services. So looking at, scheduled maintenance for trucks, and then being able to forecast. So looking ahead. And, the dashboard is just continuously evolving and changing. I don't think there's 2 weeks where it's the same, because it continuously gets refined, or we look at new things. Some things drop off, new things come up. So, priorities change. So we have to adapt to change. And, my colonel, he likes seeing this donut chart that looks at manpower utilization. I like bar graphs. So it's, I would like the commander to influence manpower utilization, but I want to look at what the density of equipment is. So it's getting the right KPI with the right visualization to influence the right decision at the point that the decision needs to be made. So that's kind of how the dashboard has evolved. And then, a dashboard only is a reflection of the data that is inside a system. So that's a lagging indicator. So whatever's happened has happened. There's nothing you can do about that data at that point. You can only impact the data that feeds into it. So dashboards are great, but you have to get after the culture of data management and systems management as well.
So have people felt across your maintenance organization felt that making sure you enter the right information, that the data is accurate, has that become more important to them? Have you seen sort of a improvement in the information that you're able to use to make this analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see it. So I'll throw a new KPI up there. And I think the most recent one I threw up there was PGR. So pending PGR. Basically, the KPI measured the average time a repair part was inside the bin at the warehouse waiting for the customer to pick up. So I threw a KPI up there, and I'm not going to talk about what the number is. but we have significantly reduced that average time, increased accountability while still maintaining our orals and our overdue services and our man-hour utilization. So, it's about building momentum, right? And momentum is focused intensity over time. So once you have momentum and then you continuously driving it, it's gonna go, right? So we built momentum with orals, we built momentum with services, and now I'll throw a KPI on there, and then everything else will stay. It might fall off a little bit while we figure this out, but then that metric will fall in line with the rest of them. So it's building that culture of excellence. Like you have to live in excellence. You have to understand that there's going to be challenges, and it's going to be uncomfortable. So progress isn't grown in comfort. You got to be uncomfortable. And so we'll throw a KPI up there, and it just reduces it. And then the impacts that has is in SAP or in our ERP system, the vendor isn't paid until that part is PGR. That's your last financial movement. So it impacts your obligated funds, right? So just by not PGRing it, and the E4 that goes down to the SSA with his GTech, he doesn't PGR it, but they pick it up. There's implications, financial implications, at the G8 level that they just don't understand because they're just trying to get to the next thing. Like, what's the next?
And PGRing it is you pick it up, but you actually tell everybody you finish the process so that everybody knows you picked it up.
Yeah, it's going to the grocery store and it's signing your name on that pad.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's PGRing it, and then your funds come out of your account into the bank's account. So that's basically what it is. And so it's just a new KPI we put up there, and it took a week or two because everybody had to figure it out. I think the other thing with data management, especially when you have high performing teams that understand data, is showing where the data came from. So if somebody, at the division of core throws up a chart and it has, this organization in red, I'm going to ask them for the background data that show that so I can get to the root causes, right? So when you visualize data, you have to be able to drill down into the specifics of that data.
Okay. And is your high performing team, are they seeing, some of these things like turning in an engine so someone else at Red River can fix it? Seems like that wouldn't be as important today as many other things, but are they starting to see, oh, now that I've turned that in, I get more coming back to me faster, so my systems are up more? I mean, are they all sort of seeing, hey, this really is working?
Yeah, and I think so. But it takes time, right? Because like I said, if you want change, you got to change the way you think first.
Yeah. So
it takes time to change the way a person thinks. And some people just won't adapt to change. And that's okay. They're going to have a hard time in a high performing organization. Like, change is constant, and you have to be able to adapt to change. So, as we continue to change, and, we have to change as leaders, and we have to understand the changes that we make and the impact it has at the ground level and the ones executing the decisions that are made above them.
Could you have done some of the things you're doing in the legacy systems that the ERPs replaced?
Yeah, you could. I could pull data. I mean, you could pull data from a lot of different systems. ERPs give you better accountability of it. It's harder to change things in ERPs. I think in the case of G Army, or our SAP system, we've added a bunch of T codes, and maybe we try to mold our ERP into our culture instead of adapting our culture to the ERP. And I think that was a tough lesson learned early on. Hopefully the Army learned from that. And then as we go to S/4HANA or whatever, ERP we go to in the future, we take that on and maybe look at looking at the infrastructure of the ERP and how we can change to align with that, I think would help out a little bit.
And so do you think that it's possible, or you're maybe even closer to what General Fogg said, that his vision for the ERP is that the Army, the logisticians, the sustainment community actually uses those capabilities to drive readiness in the Army.
Yeah, and a lot of that is knowing what the capability is, right? Is knowing the tools you have, and ERPs are scary. Like they're a big scary monster, and you know GCS Army is like a pretty scary word. So a lot of people are intimidated by it, and the screens aren't intuitive. The user experience isn't great, and you know when dealing with G Army, a lot of times either the system's going to quit or you're going to quit, but it's usually going to be you before the system. So you're going to have to adapt to it, right? So it's command and it's leadership at all levels, understanding what an ERP is, and then how we can employ it.
Did you find similar sentiments from the private sector places that you visited?
Yeah, it's tough, right? And I think it was a Dr. Bippin, and it was in one of his classes. There was like a time series scale, and it was talking about an ERP implementation, and it was leading up to the implementation with all like the requirements gatherings and everything, and how great it is. You're building it up, and then right after the implementation, it drops way down as far as satisfaction goes, and this is like the worst thing ever. And then you start to climb kind of back up out of that hole, and then starting to realize it. And I think that's a model for any kind of change, right? There's a need for change. We got to implement this new system. We got to conduct this new training, and it's going to be great, and it's going to save us. Well, you do it, and maybe your ability to change it or your ability to model it as you go gets a little bit harder. And then whenever it hits ground, it might not meet all your expectations, or you might have new expectations that you weren't aware of. So through that implementation, you have to manage those expectations. And then when you have that upswing, you got to ride it. And then you got to understand where it can go and then embrace it. Because we've already invested in the ERP, and we just have to go there with it.
Now, you and 18th Field Artillery Brigade are clearly on that upper side of that second hump there you're talking about. How do you have a feel for lots of other examples in the Army, or are they catching up? Or are you seeing other things that encourage you?
Yeah, I think it is. I think dealing with CASCOM and some of the initiatives they have, looking at where we're going with S4 HANA, really attacking the user experience and the interface of the ERP system, because you have these soldiers come in and they're, 17, 18, 19 years old, and they've grown up, on Twitter and on, Facebook, and that's what they know is that kind of technology. And ERPs have been around for, like 30, 40 years. They've been around. And it hasn't really evolved to keep pace with the people. Right now, the people have kind of evolved more than the technology. So I know CASCOM is really getting after the user experience and the user interface. And that'll pay dividends, huge dividends, when it talks about the cleanliness of data that we're using to analyze and forecast and build readiness off of.
All right. Hey, Sabrina, is there anything else we should talk about?
No, this has been really great. Brian, you are so articulate and have such an ability to make these concise concepts to like 5 words, what was it?
5 words and 10 acronyms.
Yeah, well, the greatest, well, it's not 5 words. The greatest innovation is growing at the point of need. I was like, whoa, that was awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's really good. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Brian, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Brian. Absolutely. See you guys.
Okay, take care. Bye. Thanks, Van.